Okay, so yeah, this thing's definitely putting out some really great performance, and I love this 8.4-inch display. What's going on, everybody? It's etaprime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new ONEXPLAYER 2. Now, I've actually been really excited about putting this video out, and I've had this in my possession for the last 2 weeks or so. I did post a picture of it in my community section here on YouTube, and since then I've had a lot of people asking me when that video is going to be coming out. And here's the first one. This is the first look at the brand new ONEXPLAYER 2. If you're not familiar with this Ryzen powered handheld from ONEXPLAYER, we do have something a bit different here that we haven't seen in these, Ryzen 6000 handhelds yet, and that's detachable controllers. As you can see, both of these controllers will slide right off, and on the rear of the tablet portion of the handheld, we've got a little kickstand there so we can kind of set this down. And I do want to mention that the unit I have in my possession is an early prototype, and ONEXPLAYER didn't send over the midsection for the controller. But once these are detached, we can actually attach it directly to the midsection, which will be included if you do end up picking one of these up, and we can use it as a wireless controller. It looks a little something like this. I kind of wish they would have sent it over, but unfortunately it was a bit early when I got my hands on this unit. Now, it would have been really cool to have both of these work independently from each other while they're detached, but unfortunately they just won't. Now, we do have dual analog sticks and analog triggers with this unit, and they're using the D-pad that was used in the ONEXPLAYER Mini and the big ONEXPLAYER, so it's actually a really good D-pad. In this prototype, it is a bit tighter than I'm used to, but I believe it's just because this is a really early unit. But these will go right back on. They're going to slide in. As you can see, we've got some LEDs here that light up once everything's put back together. And keep in mind, this does have Bluetooth built in, so you could always connect Xbox or PlayStation controllers to this and set the tablet portion on the table and have two players going at the same time if you wanted to. Another thing I wanted to mention here is, yes, this is a physical connection once they're connected back to the handheld. That way we don't have to worry about any kind of input latency or anything like that. It's using these pogo pins here on both sides. Now, when it comes to the specs of the ONEXPLAYER 2, they're actually going to have two different variants. They're going to go Intel and AMD, and when it comes to the Intel version, it's going to be using a 13th gen mobile CPU, and we actually haven't even seen anything on the 13th gen mobile CPUs yet, so we're not exactly sure how that thing's going to perform. But the AMD version is the one we're going to be taking a look at in this video. We've got the Ryzen 7 6800U. We've seen this in a few handhelds this year. We've got 8 cores, 16 threads, and a clock up to 4.7 GHz. And since we're working with the 6800U, we get the new Radeon 680M iGPU. This is based on RDNA 2. We've got 12 compute units and a clock up to 2200 MHz. RAM is going to be handled by LPDDR5 running at 6400 MHz, and you can opt for either 16 or 32. It does support a 2280 M.2 SSD, plus we've got a micro SD card slot. And one of my favorite things about the new ONEXPLAYER 2 is the larger display. This is coming in at 8.4 inches. It's got a resolution of 2560 by 1600, and it's an IPS screen. Now, obviously, gaming at 2560 by 1600 on this APU will be a bit limited, but it will handle older stuff at those resolutions pretty well. We've also got Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.0. It's got a 65.5 watt-hour battery, and they've also added dual stereo speakers tuned by Harman Kardon. Now, when it comes to I/O, down here we've got a USB Type-C port. This one is 3.2, plus we have a few extra pogo pins here for their magnetic keyboard. It's a detachable keyboard that's going to be sold separately. And moving around to the top of the device, we've got a micro SD card slot, a full-size USB 3.2 port. We've also got a full-function USB 4 port here, and this is a 40 gig port from what I can tell so far. I've done some eGPU testing on it, and yeah, I mean, you can definitely up the performance. We'll take a look at that by the end of the video. They've also included a 3.5mm audio jack, and if we take a closer look, we've got our volume rocker, power button, and our turbo button. If you're familiar with these ONEXPLAYERs, you know they include a turbo button to up the TDP just by pressing it. And with the ONEXPLAYER 2, stock it's running at 15 watts, but once we enable turbo mode, it jumps up to 30 watts, and it really does unlock the performance. Now, the overall button layout is pretty much the same as the older ONEXPLAYERs. As you can see, we've got our A, B, X, Y. We've also got our analog stick over here, and they've kept that keyboard button, which does come in handy. Basically, we can tap it once, it'll bring up an on-screen keyboard, or if we hold it for about 3 seconds, it'll enable mouse mode for the built-in controller. That way, we can navigate the whole operating system using the built-in gamepad. Now around back, we do have this built-in kickstand, and it looks like we've got a lot of ventilation here for the CPU cooler and the M.2 cooler. This is definitely a larger handheld when you compare it to others on the market, given that we have that 8.4-inch display. Most of the other ones come with a 7-inch, and it might not seem like a lot, but it makes a world of difference. As you can see in this comparison between the Steam Deck and the One X Player 2, and I'll give you a side view here, it's actually not much larger than the Steam Deck, if any at all. And finally, before we get into testing, I wanted to go over pricing here. So this is going to be up on Indiegogo December 19th. For the base model, which has 16 gigabytes of RAM and a 512 gigabyte M.2 SSD, $8.99 for the early bird special, and at that price point, it's actually not a bad deal given the specs we have here. Now, as you can see, going up to 32 gigs of RAM and a 2 terabyte drive does bring that price up even on the early bird, but if you're interested in something like this, I would definitely try to hop on that $8.99 price tag. You can always upgrade that M.2 later on down the road, but given the price point of handhelds right now with the 6800U, it's really not too bad. Okay, so jumping right into some gaming, we've got Forza Ryzen 5 1200p medium settings. This is one of those games that does function very well on these APUs, especially based on RDNA 2. I got an average of 87 FPS, and if you take a look at Afterburner, we are in turbo mode with this, so we're getting great performance, but this is totally playable at 15 watts. Medium settings, you'll have to drop it down to 800p, or at 1200p, go down to low settings, but at 15 watts, you can still play this all day perfectly fine. Next thing I wanted to take a look at were a few benchmarks, and here we have Geekbench 5, single core 1473, multi 7951. Now keep in mind, I am in turbo mode, and this is their stock turbo configuration, but we can get more out of this by tweaking the APU using a third-party utility. Checking out 3D Mark Night Raid, total score here 25,265. Fire Strike, we got a 6,470. And Time Spy, 2,731. So yeah, these synthetic benchmarks are looking right on par with other 6800U devices on the market right now, and I know I could get more out of this, but I just kind of kept that stock turbo configuration to see what we got, and overall, not bad at all. Moving over to Spiderman, Miles Morales, 800p low, and on these APUs, we really do have to drop it down if you want to run it at 60. Now, if you don't mind running this at 30 FPS or even 45, we could go up to 1200p medium settings with it, but they have put out some new updates, and I see performance has increased, especially on these 6800Us. Another thing I always like to do with these handheld devices is test out the dPad, and I figured we'd do that with Street Fighter V. We're at 1200p medium settings, easier to run game, and the dPad is basically the same from their older devices, and I've always had good luck with them, but this one does seem a bit tighter, and it might be because this is a prototype, but I mean, if they use this same dPad here, we're going to be good with fighting games. Here's one that I've been playing a lot recently, High on Life. We're at 800p low, and I do have VSync turned on. This one seems to kind of overrun itself when we've got VSync off, and we will get some dips down into the 40s, but when VSync is on, we only get dips into the upper 50s, and I really think it comes down to the TDP here. Remember that CPU and GPU are fighting for the same wattage, so I think that's exactly what was happening when VSync's off. It's just really overrunning itself. Doom Eternal, 1200p medium settings with dynamic resolution scale on, and I use the FPS based dynamic resolution scale. I got it set to around 74 FPS. You can go lower if you want to, just set it right there at 60, but I kind of wanted to see what we could do. Still looks great, and it's perfectly playable on the 6800U. Here's one I haven't tested on this chipset in a while. We've got GTA 5 1200p with a normal high mix. We're up there over 80 FPS, and yeah, I mean, this is one of those games that, came out a while ago. It's been optimized over the years, and it works great on these RDNA 2 based APUs. God of War is another one I always like to test on these handhelds, and it really comes down to seeing what kind of optimizations the developers have done, and it really doesn't seem like much has changed from the first few months this game was out on these APUs. I was really hoping to see a nice performance boost here, but I don't even think they're really thinking about the lower end stuff with this game. At 800p original settings, we can't quite get a lock 60 out of it. Now if we went down to low settings and turn FSR to ultra performance, we can run this at 60, but I just don't like doing it because it doesn't look great. And the final game I tested here on the iGPU was Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and I just ran the built-in benchmark. And with this, I let it optimize its settings as soon as I started it up. I didn't change anything from their optimizations, and we got an average of 105 FPS. But it does look like they took the resolution down to 800p. Now I know for a fact that this chip can actually offer a really great experience at 1200p with FSR set to balanced and basically all of the other settings to balanced in this game, but I just ran the benchmark with the out-of-box experience and I mean it's really not that bad. So the ONEXPLAYER 2 can definitely game on the built-in iGPU, but one of my favorite things about USB 4 on these AMD platforms is the ability to connect an external GPU. I've got a Thunderbolt 3 Sonnet dock here with an RTX 3080, definitely overkill. I would usually use a 3060, but it's in another project right now and I didn't want to tear it apart. Okay, so I actually had to install the newer NVIDIA driver. Windows was trying to download an older one, but as you can see, it's mirroring the displays, and I actually only want to run on the external monitor from that 3080 Ti, so I'm just going to swap it over now. We're going to go to 4K with it. And if we take a look at the task manager, you can see we've got that Ryzen 7 6800U, 16 gigabytes of RAM. We've still got access to that 680M iGPU, but instead of using that, we're going to be using the RTX 3080 Ti here. And now, instead of running at 1200p medium settings on the iGPU, we're at 4K Ultra on an external display. 3080 Ti just can't reach its full potential running over Thunderbolt, but I mean, we've got a nice boost in GPU performance as you can see, and I wouldn't recommend, a high-end card like this. Like I mentioned, the one that I always have good luck with is the 3060, a non-Ti variant. I would have used it, but it's in another project right now. Another thing I wanted to take a look at was battery life on the new ONEXPLAYER 2. I did some testing at 15 watts and 30 watts turbo mode, and it's actually not looking bad. We've got that 65 watt hour battery, and at 15 watts, total power consumption with the screen brightness at 100% is 33.7 watts. Taking the TDP up to 30 watts, total system power consumption jumps up to 48.9 watts. So with some simple math here, at 15 watts, we can expect around 1 hour and 50 minutes out of this thing. At 30 watts, 1 hour and 28 minutes. So all in all, not bad at all. I mean, it's on par with the other handhelds that are on the market right now. So far, I've been having a lot of fun with the ONEXPLAYER 2, and my favorite thing about it is the larger 8.4-inch display. It's an IPS. We've got a higher resolution than we really need here, but it does look great while watching videos, and I know some people aren't into these larger handhelds, but if you are, then this one would be one to definitely take a look at. I'll have at least one more video coming up really soon. We have to get some emulation out of the way on this, and there's a lot that I want to test on it, so I figured we'd just do a whole dedicated video to that. But if there's anything else you want to see running on the ONEXPLAYER 2, let me know in the comments below. We've still got a little bit of tweaking that we could do with the TDP and the clocks on the GPU and CPU to get better performance out of it, even at 30 watts. So, I mean, there's a lot that we could do with this. But I'd actually like to know your thoughts on the new ONEXPLAYER 2. Is this something that you'd be interested in? Are you not into these larger handhelds? Is it too expensive? Are you going to wait for an RDNA 3 powered handheld? Let me know down below. And, if you're interested in learning more, maybe even back in the Indiegogo, I'll leave a link in the description to their Indiegogo and their website. This is actually going up December 19th. So if you're interested in picking up that early bird special for $8.99, I would definitely jump right on it. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Keep an eye on the channel because I got more coming. And like always, thanks for watching.